turned on, so I just want to let you know that we will be starting at 8 p.m. And we do have a lot of participants tonight, so we are going to mute everybody from our end, but if you have a phone, we're going to ask that you mute yourself, and you can do that by hitting the mute button or *6. So we're going to get started with some house rules. Some of you have already heard me say this, but we are going to mute you from our end. If you're on a phone, we're going to ask you to mute yourself by either pushing the mute button or pressing *6. That'll help keep the background noise to a minimum. We are going to have a designated times throughout the webinar where we will have a question, stopping for some questions. So what I'm going to ask is that if you think of a question as we're going along, if you could type those questions into the panel on the right-hand side of your screen, then at those breakpoints, we will try to take 2 or 3 questions and answer those. And no worries if we don't get to your question. You can always reach out to me later at promiseleader@sandyhookpromise.org, and we can get those answered. I would suggest that you take out a piece of paper and write down the technical support number and the meeting ID number in case while we're going through the webinar you run into a problem, and then you can address that as soon as possible. I want everybody to know that we are recording this webinar, so we will be sending out a link at a later date so that you can watch this again, or if you have to drop off early, you'll be able to see it in its entirety. So again, if you could take a moment just to mute yourselves if you're on calling in from a phone by hitting mute or *6, that would be great. So let's get started. I'd like to introduce all of us on this webinar call tonight. I'm Judith Coffey, the Promise Leader Coordinator here at Sandy Hook Promise. I'm with Paula Finbo, our National Field Director, and we have Sarah Malik, our Program Manager. And then we're really excited because we have Buffy, who is one of our Promise Leaders, and she and Karen, who unfortunately cannot be with us tonight, Buffy is going to share their Sandy Hook Promise awareness building event that they held, and she'll go through all the steps of planning and implementing, and then the results after that. So we're really excited to have Buffy on tonight with us. So these are some of the things that we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to talk about who is Sandy Hook Promise, who is a Promise Leader, and how do Promise Leaders help achieve our mission. We're going to talk about some obstacles to taking action, and then we're going to hear some Promise Leader stories. So you're going to hear Buffy, like I just told you about, and she and Karen did an awareness building event, but I'm going to talk about another Promise Leader that implemented a program within her son's school, and then I'm going to talk about a Promise Leader who did her activity around advocacy. And then we're going to go over some tips and resources at the end for taking action. So who is Sandy Hook Promise? Sandy Hook Promise is a national gun violence prevention organization founded by some of the families who lost their loved ones in the tragic school shooting on December 14th, 2012. So if we can remember to hit the mute button on our phone or hit the *6 button, that will help reduce some of the background noise. Thank you for that. Thanks. So what do we do? So Sandy Hook Promise helps prevent gun violence by teaching schools and youth organizations how to recognize the signs and the signals of individuals who may be at risk of hurting themselves or others, and helps them to intervene before it happens, before gun violence happens. And so how do we do that? We do that 3 different ways. We educate, partner, and we advocate. So we educate by engaging and mobilizing youth and adults in gun violence awareness and prevention. And we partner with the schools and youth organizations to deliver our Know the Signs prevention programs. And we advocate for sensible prevention-focused mental health and gun safety state and federal policy. And so why do we do it? We do it so no other parent has to experience the loss of their child. So there are some key findings that helped inform our mission, and some of those are Americans just aren't engaged in the issue of gun violence. They feel hopeless, and they're turned off by all the gun rhetoric. There seems to be too much focus on the gun and not on the human behind that gun. There is a belief that policy is the only solution, but we know historically that education and community engagement are drivers to social and long-term change. And we also know that there's minimal support for prevention. So even though individuals might give off signs about hurting themselves or others, we know that, that there's minimal support for prevention. So to break it down a little bit more, we educate, engage, and mobilize. And so we want to shift the focus away from the gun and more about protecting your child. We want to make it personal versus about the gun. We want to acknowledge that people feel helpless and hopeless and introduce what can be done today. We also want to educate Americans that gun violence is preventable, and we just need to know the signs. And then we want to build an engaged base of Americans to take action. And we want to create promise leaders in schools and communities. So we want to partner and deliver. We partner with schools and youth organizations for our 4 Know the Signs: our youth mental health first aid, Say Something, safety assessment and intervention, and Start with Hello. And then we advocate. We want to advocate for mental health and wellness by identifying and intervening to get people the help that they need before they hurt themselves or others. We advocate for gun safety. We want to make sure that people that should not have a firearm are restricted, and that all firearms are kept safe and secure at all times from children and teens. And then lastly, research. We advocate for funding research to identify evidence-based policy and non-policy programs. So that's just a little overview about Sandy Hook Promise and Promise Leaders. So we're going to open it up to a few questions. Sarah, do we have anything? Any questions yet?
We don't have anything yet, but I just want to, recommend again, we are picking up some feedback. So just for technical purposes, I sent most of you your audio pin, and what that does is it allows us to mute you on this end. So, just either, allow us to mute you, or please mute yourself, because I'm just hearing a lot of background, I know that's, kind of impacting the sound. So again, make sure, you're muting yourself either by pressing *6 or, press mute on your phone. And that's gonna help with some of the audio. But no questions that I see yet. I'm gonna pull up the chat box. If you do have any questions, there is a chat function on the control panel on your right side, and feel free to chat or type a question to us at any point during the webinar. We'll have time at the end too, but no questions so far.
Okay. So now I'm going to pass it over to Paula, and she is going to talk a little bit about who is a promise leader, why we need our promise leaders, and some obstacles to taking action.
Good evening, everybody. Quickly, if you are calling in to this call and not on the computer, if you can push mute on your phone, that will help with the background noise so that everyone is able to hear and participate in this conversation. So who is a promise leader? I hope if you're looking at our PowerPoint presentation and on the webinar, you can see yourself in these words. Many of our promise leaders are parents, they're grandparents, they're teachers or work within a school or a youth organization. Many of our promise leaders also work in mental health and healthcare. Others are concerned citizens and community leaders. A promise leader, as defined by us here at Sandy Hook Promise, is any committed supporter of Sandy Hook Promise's unique mission and approach to preventing gun violence before it happens, who's willing to go beyond activity at the individual level and build awareness, implement programs, and advocate within their community. We know that in order to have the impact that we want as an organization, we must move beyond individual actions to actions that protect and educate more people and prevent gun violence before it happens. Promise leaders engage in 2 or more activities a year, and the promise leader activities can be education and awareness building. It could be implementing one of our 4 no-cost Know the Signs programs or an advocacy action. Many of our promise leader activities take just a couple hours a month to implement. And in forming our promise leader program, we intentionally wanted to keep the term community loosely. We know that community is anywhere that you are, and anywhere that you are able to take action as a promise leader, be that in your neighborhood, your school, your organization, your workplace, your place of worship. Anywhere that you are is community. Also, we're going to share 3 different stories tonight from promise leaders, and I hope as you hear those stories, you can see that no promise leader looks alike. There are many ways to take action and to participate. And so why promise leaders? I briefly mentioned this, but at Sandy Hook Promise, we're focused on long-term change. And we know that that happens when individuals come together to take action within their community. And together, promise leaders magnify our reach within community and engage and empower and protect more people from gun violence than can be done through any individual action alone. To date, we have promise leaders in 49 states. And I think the thing that we hear most often from promise leaders when they're trying to get started is they're just a little nervous. They're scared about the unknown or what if. And we know that this fear is real. Judith talked about this at the beginning of the webinar, but when it comes to gun violence, it often feels really big. It's like asking, how do you prevent hunger? There's so many different ways to go about it, so sometimes we fear just taking that first step and getting started. Unfortunately, the issue of gun violence has also become very polarized in our country. It seems that people either have to be one side or the other. And so people fear taking action because they worry they might upset their neighbors or their family members or friends. But we hope as you listen to some of the stories tonight from our Promise leaders, you'll see Sandy Hook Promise's unique approach to preventing gun violence before it happens and focusing less on the gun and instead of the reasons why somebody might pick up a firearm to hurt themselves or somebody else, that we can address that fear and you're more likely to bring people together over your common values versus positions. So now I want to invite Promise Leader Buffy to join us. Buffy is from Maryland and worked with a friend of hers who's also a Promise Leader to organize an awareness building event. Buffy, I'd love for you to share about your initial fears or hesitations as you began organizing your event.
Sure. Thanks, Paula. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me tonight. I'm very proud to be a Sandy Hook Promise leader. And, you know, as the staff at Sandy Hook Promise knows, I actually grew up in Newtown and went to Sandy Hook Elementary School and have felt an overwhelming need and desire to do something in my own community here in Maryland. After what happened, my parents still live there, and I have a lot of friends who still live there, and I feel like it's with me daily, like it is all of us, regardless if you grew up in Newtown or not. And I found you know, Sandy Hook Promise to be a great outlet for me, and I signed up to be a Promise leader. And little did I know that a friend of mine in my community also signed up to be a Promise leader, and we both didn't even know it. And when we discovered it, we decided we really wanted to do something together. But we were a little nervous about how we might get started doing that for many of the reasons that Paula just described. But also, like Paula said, you know, community is where you are, and we all are part of a lot of communities. And so Karen and I were thinking which community that we both belong to is the right place to start. Is it our school? Is it our group of friends? And we decided to hold an awareness building conversation in our community of women in our neighborhood. We have a neighborhood women's group. And so we felt like that was the best place to start. But we were a little nervous. Also, like Paula mentioned, you know, the neighborhood group that we belong to has been around for a long time, but it's family oriented, and what it mostly provides on an ongoing basis is women's nights, couples nights, and a lot of family events. But we've never tackled any issues kind of beyond that. We certainly haven't ever talked about anything like gun control or gun violence. And so we thought the best step for us to take would be to start something that allowed for this group to host it. So we started a salon series, and that the first avenue to bring people together would be around gun violence and safety for our children. We knew that regardless of what political party our neighborhood group was from, that the common denominator would be how do we keep our children safe. And so that was a great way we found out to bring people together. And we held this event in December, which in hindsight really was a terrible time to do it because there was a lot of holiday things going on and people were super busy, and we didn't even know if we were going to have 2 people show up. But we were so pleasantly surprised to have 20 people show up, and honestly it was not all the usual suspects that I thought would show, not my friends, you know, all my close friends or anything. It was a lot of women that I kind of knew or a few I didn't know at all. And that was a little intimidating, but ultimately we had a great event and a lot of support, and it was very an event that created a lot of goodwill and continued action in our community.
Thank you so much for that, Buffy. And is there any advice that you would share with other Promise leaders who are going about to maybe take action for the first time?
Yeah, I would say recognizing that sometimes it's challenging to figure out exactly which community you want to go to and how to start. That, you know, keeping the conversation about kind of protecting our loved ones, protecting the community was a great place to start, and meeting people where they're at. So our community group was a great place to start, and the kind of unintended consequences that have come from this meeting, like I said, were kind of unexpected, but incredible. Two particular things came from it. One, that there was so much synergy in the room among this kind of diverse group of women to do something, to do anything, right? One thing we did was to start a private Facebook group. And we live in a county in Maryland called Howard County, and we called it Howard County Women Against Gun Violence. It took, no money, really no time to set it up, and within a week we had almost like 300 women. People were inviting their friends and that sort of thing. So it's this ongoing group that we've had for the last 7 months that has really been both, cathartic for all of us to share information and resources, but it's actually bred a good deal of camaraderie and action. And it's not a full-time job for anybody. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel, but it's just a great place to share information and resources about Sandy Hook Promise, about other gun violence protection or prevention groups that are both regional or what's happening across the country, about ways to get involved in advocacy efforts. And this group even wrote a letter to the editor that was published in the Baltimore Sun. So that was one great thing that came from this group. And the second thing, and that was because this was a group of women who had a lot of different backgrounds, a lot of different experiences, kind of came to the conversation from a similar place, but from different places, but still with the synergy in the room was able to kind of quickly decide little pockets of people doing different things. So that was one thing. And then the second thing was there was a group of us who have kids at a local elementary school, and we're very interested in the programs that were talked about that evening that Sandy Hook Promises provides. And so a group of 5 of us decided to try to start with Hello in our elementary school. And we called our principal, asked if we could get a meeting, provided resources to her in advance so she could read about it. And now it doesn't always necessarily work this way, but we had a principal who was very open to this. And so during Start with Hello Week in February, we launched our program, and it's been fantastic. We've done a lot of different things in our elementary school and have decided to do even more this coming year, and we have a committee that's involved. So there's lots of things that can happen from a conversation that can grow organically with a group of motivated people.
Thank you so much, Buffy, for sharing your and Karen's story. I think it's so inspiring to hear how an initial conversation that you and Karen were nervous about inspired community action of 300 people coming together to know that they're not helpless and hopeless, to writing a letter to the editor and building awareness that way, and also by helping prevent gun violence and protect our kids by bringing Start with Hello to your school. Thank you so much. That is just one of the amazing things that Promise leaders do to help support Sandy Hook Promise and further our mission of preventing gun violence before it takes place. I'm going to turn it back to Judith, who's going to share 2 more inspiring stories.
Yeah, so Buffy shared her story about an awareness building event, and this next story is about a Promise leader, Kumid, in Georgia, who chose to bring Say Something to her son's school. And so initially she had set up a meeting with her son's principal, and they went back and forth, weighed the pros and the cons of having the teachers and educators deliver the program that they knew they wanted to bring into the school, but were concerned about time and that sort of thing. So they settled on Nikhil, Kumid's son, and 5 of his friends, you see there in the picture. As a leadership building program, they took on the Say Something program and brought it into the 9th and 10th grade classrooms. So it served as a leadership building activity for the kids, and it took the pressure off of the educators. They delivered the program in pairs together with a teacher in every classroom. And they knew it was a successful program, but a couple days afterwards, they found that a student who had heard that in one of the trainings with Nikhil in particular had realized that after hearing the Say Something program that she needed to share some information with her teacher. So she did. She shared with her teacher that she had a friend who had been talking about harming herself, and they together went to the school psychologist, and this girl who was in distress was able to get help from her parents and from other professionals. So that's what the program is meant to do, and Kumid says, you know, how amazing it was, and that one of the teachers had written Nikhil a heartfelt letter stating, you know, how great it was and thanking him for making such a difference at their school. So that's a story about student leaders bringing one of our programs into their school. And now I'm going to talk about another Promise leader who decided to do her Promise leader activity in the advocacy piece. And so Susan, who's from Missouri, decided to sign up for our call to action last May for Mental Health Awareness Month, where we offered a template for Promise leaders to use it in its entirety, or they were welcome to make it more personal and change it up a little bit, but to send to their local newspaper in an effort to build awareness around mental health and the stigma that is so often attached to that. So Susan told me that that her community is very rural and a pro-gun community, and so that did give her pause, and she feared that others, she feared what the others might say in her community, but she realized that the message was just too important, and she had to participate in this call to action. And she goes on to say that Sandy Hook Promise provided the details about the message, a sample letter, and she just customized it to fit her comfort level. And the newspaper's online site made it very easy to copy and paste it into their letter site, and all that happened was she copy and pasted it, and the paper called to ask her if she really wanted to run it, and she said yes, and they did. And she was happy that she did. So we've gone over 3 different ways where Promise leaders can participate. You can do an awareness building event where you talk about Sandy Hook Promise and the programs that we offer and what our mission and approach is. You can choose to implement a program in your school or your youth organization, or you can go the advocacy piece with something like our letter to the editor call to action. And so now I'm going to pass it back to Paula, who is going to talk about our call to action weeks and how to get started as a Promise leader.
Thank you, Judith. For those of you who might be joining and who are thinking about taking action as a Promise leader for the first time, or for those of you who maybe have joined us for other actions, we hope that you'll be inspired to join us for our next call to action the week of September 12th through the 18th, and that is our Promise Leader Conversations. Judith and I both shared research that when it comes to gun violence, many people feel helpless. They don't know how to take the first step. We know that when you have a meaningful conversation, especially with somebody that you know, that you already have a relationship with, that you trust, that conversation can help break through those feelings of helplessness. And Promise leaders have the power to put a human face on gun violence prevention, share Sandy Hook Promises message, and shift the conversation from one of helplessness to rather one that inspires their friends, their families, colleagues, neighbors to get engaged. A Promise Leader conversation can happen anywhere you feel comfortable. It could happen in your house, over a play date with your kids. It could happen in your school, at the local coffee shop. It could happen over pizza. Really anywhere that you choose, that you feel comfortable, and how you want to put your own unique stamp on it. On our website, sandyhookpromise.org/conversations, you'll find information on how to sign up and register for your conversation. You'll also find a helpful planning guide of what to do to get prepared for your conversation, a sample agenda and talking points, and more information to help you through planning your conversation. Also, the first week in September, we're going to be organizing a webinar that's specifically dedicated to Promise Leader conversations, where we'll be reviewing the agenda, specifically going over details, doing some, role plays or examples so you can listen and feel really empowered and comfortable and confident for hosting your Promise Leader conversation. And we really hope that you're able to join us. In October, we'll be organizing our Say Something Week call to action, where you can participate as a Promise Leader in a couple of different ways. If you are a Promise Leader who works within a school or a youth organization, you can simply sign up to bring Say Something to your school or youth organization. If you have children or grandchildren who attend a school, you can also participate by asking their school to bring Say Something. And if you have relationships, friends, neighbors, other people in your community who have a relationship with schools, you can also sign up and bring Say Something Week to your school or youth organization that way. So as getting started as a Promise Leader, we decided to highlight 3 steps for getting started. The first is to choose your action. Sandy Hook Promise works to prevent gun violence through education and awareness building, through implementing our Know the Signs programs, and through advocacy. And here we listed just some examples of what that could look like. We encourage you to choose what area you're most personally interested in or comfortable with and start there. If you're more comfortable in education and awareness building, you can organize an online campaign or host an information table at a community event. If you are interested in our prevention programs and have relationships with schools or young people, you can bring one of our no-cost Know the Signs violence prevention programs to your school or youth organization. And if you're interested in advocacy, you can choose to write a letter to the editor or attend rallies or events and share Sandy Hook Promises message. Once you've chosen your action, step 2 is to choose your audience. Who do you want to reach? Who is it that you have relationships with? Is it young people or schools and youth organizations? If so, perhaps bringing a no-cost violence prevention program to young people or a school or organization is the route you want to choose. If you have a lot of friends, other parents, grandparents, neighbors, perhaps you want to choose an awareness community, awareness and education building event. And if you want to help influence legislators and let legislators and decision makers know how much you care about this issue, then advocacy might be your route. And finally, step 3 is making contact, making that first step. We encourage you to think about how you want to reach out to those you want to connect with, and strongly encourage you to meet face-to-face, as Buffy shared. Face-to-face does have the highest success rate because you're able to build a relationship. However, if you're more comfortable getting started with an email or a phone or a letter, we encourage you to do that too. think about what you want to accomplish by making contact and making your first step. What is it that you want to ask of the people that you're reaching out to? Think about what your ask is and draft an agenda to guide your conversation. And then finally, we encourage you to prepare. Think about if you need materials. Many of those are available in our Promise Leader toolkit or website, or by contacting us at promiseleader@sandyhookpromise.org, and then practicing.
So now I'm just going to talk about some of these helpful hints from some of our Promise leaders. Like Paula was just talking about, Dana from California recommends that you have a face-to-face connection. That email and Facebook are great tools, but to really make that connection face-to-face is the best way. And then Liz goes on to talk about perseverance. Sometimes we get very excited about being a Promise leader and whatever activity it is that we've decided we want to do, a program implementation or the letter to the editor, but the way it's received is not always the way we expect it to be received, and the important piece is to persevere and to keep moving forward, keep having conversations with people. You just don't know where it's going to lead, so just keep talking and asking. And then Laura from Virginia says, start with who you know. A small step forward is better than not taking the first step. So just keep moving forward.
And it's really fun to see the chat that I see a lot of Promise leaders are already taking the first step and connecting with other people who might be in your area or who have already signed up to host a Promise Leader conversation in September. So thank you so much. This is very exciting.
Okay, so this slide just gives you some of the website addresses and links for some really helpful tools. Of course, Facebook, our private Promise Leader Facebook page, which is private to just Sandy Hook Promise Leaders, but it's an excellent way to reach out to other people, to read articles about inspiring events or personal stories, and to ask for help. It's a great place to reach out and ask people how they've implemented a program or a more specific question. So that's one that I strongly urge you to utilize. And then, of course, Paula was talking about the Promise Leader conversations that are coming up in September, and this would be the link to go to sign up. And once you sign up, you will receive fact sheets and planning guides and templates and that sort of thing, everything that you should need. And then the Promise Leader Toolkit, which is it's chock full of information on getting started after you've already started, some of the information and activities that you can do, and that also includes some templates for or master sheets for signups or that sort of thing. And then sandyhookpromise.org, of course, is something that I even visit regularly and watch our videos, and we have a blog that you can read along with, and then, of course, get information on any of our call to actions or our programs specific information. So that's a good information gathering site. And then last but not least, my email address, which is promiseleader@sandyhookpromise.org, and you're always welcome to email me. I try to get back as quickly as I can, but any question at all, if I can't answer it, I know all the right people to go to get that answered. So now I think we have a little bit of time for more questions. If anybody has a question, Sarah, did anybody? Have you
Yeah.
prompted
So,
questions?
so many of you, like Paula said, are asking, already looking to take action. I see many of you, you're reaching out, saying what area you're from and looking for people in other areas to link up with to start. So again, go to the Facebook page and there you can find a map, and you can, look to link up with some people, or again, you can email Judith and she'll be sure to get you linked with people in your area. Um, One person asked, Ron asked, what's the education process for becoming a promise leader? Judith, do you want to just answer that real quick?
Yeah, so um, anybody can be a promise leader. It's really about where your interest lies and what speaks to you. If a program speaks to you, or the toolkit is an excellent resource in teaching you what it means to be a promise leader and how you can carry that out. But that's something, Ron, you and I can talk more in depth about. But I would strongly suggest downloading the toolkit at sandyhookpromise.org/toolkit and familiarizing yourself a little bit with that. And that will help you understand a little better what being a promise leader actually does.
This is
And Josh,
Buffy. I just wanted to quickly chime in that it's great to see people asking each other, where you're from and trying to collaborate, because what I will say is the Sandy Hook Promise Leader Facebook page has been a great resource to Karen and I, and we met a couple of women who live about a half an hour away from us to the north and to the south, who have come. One came to our meeting, I was invited to another meeting, and we've just been able to kind of collaborate loosely and be there as support for one another. So even if you're not in the same area and you don't have the same community, it's great to connect with people in your region.
Yeah. Thank you, Buffy. That's true.
Yeah, the only other question that we have that's not about, where people live and things like that, and again, you can find that on the Facebook page. Also, people are asking about how to get the toolkit. Again, that's a digital download. It's not through the mail, and the link is provided. I'm leaving up the resource page for you to see. I also just typed it into the chat box. Josh asked a question early on, Josh Perkins, if we partner with police departments, to if they have, a strong presence in school safety curriculum. So I just said to Josh, that certainly, we see a lot of school resource officers in schools. We see them partnering oftentimes with youth organizations. So certainly that's an audience that we want participating, especially for our safety assessment and intervention program. So if you do have more questions about programs or appropriate audiences to link our 4 no-cost programs to, just feel free to email Judith there at promiseleader@sandyhookpromise.org, and we can get you more information. Let me just see. There is a question that just came up. Let me get to it here. Rachel wants to know, she hears a lot of support, or she supports the Second Amendment and stores guns responsibly. That's what she hears a lot. Is there a recommended response that we might give to someone who says, I support the Second Amendment and I store my guns responsibly? And more or less that's, they're saying that they don't, want to listen to the message, it sounds like. So does anyone want to expand on that? Maybe Paula, do you want to take that?
Sure, that's a great question, Rachel, and I think a question that we get often. I think, first of all, if you're talking to people who say they store their guns responsibly, just tell them thank you. We appreciate that, and certainly hope, gun owners do store their. We know the vast majority of gun owners are responsible gun owners. And we have many gun owners who have joined us at Sandy Hook Promise because we're not anti-gun. We're against gun violence, and that our goal is by focusing on this issue in a different way, on focusing on what might go into an act of gun violence, the days, weeks, months, sometimes even years before somebody might pick up a firearm to hurt themselves or somebody else, we can prevent gun violence, save lives, and save the human cost associated with gun violence. So we're not an anti-gun organization, and I think just by letting folks know that our mission and our work in this space is really unique, in that if you have somebody who tells you they support the Second Amendment and they store their guns responsibly, I think you can say, thank you. And this sounds like an organization you might want to know more about, because they're working with people on both sides of the aisle on helping prevent gun violence before it happens. And perhaps even sharing our Know the Signs programs with them, that a lot of people can get behind that, because it's about education and awareness and empowering people to, when they do see the signs of somebody who might be thinking about hurting themselves or somebody else, they will say something to prevent that act of violence and intervene so that doesn't happen.
Great. Thanks, Paula. Ron wants to know, when suggesting to start with hello or say something to his grandkids' school, what is his role as a promise leader? So I can take that one, Ron. That's a great question. Your role as promise leader, is really to talk about Sandy Hook Promise and what we have to offer. And certainly, start with hello and say something would be, two great youth empowerment programs that we could bring in at no cost to any school or organization. So, if you start that conversation and just get them, on board, excited about it, and then you get to the point where they need a little bit more information or are ready to schedule a program, you can always pass that off to us so we can handle, the logistics, scheduling, that sort of thing. But that was a great question, and we would be happy and excited for you to share not only just about the mission and work of Sandy Hook Promise, but also about our 4 programs as well. So great question. Josh asked. He offered direct support in presenting the programs and coordinating with PTO to solicit other volunteers. He thinks it would be good to be sensitive to difficulties teachers may have in adding material to their obligations. You're answering Ron. Okay, sorry about that, Josh. I was just kind of reading as you were typing. Let's see.
I think that's a great point, Josh. And Ron, this also goes to how you might help bring Say Something or Start with Hello to your grandchildren's schools. The example we used in the webinar from Kumid, Kumid met with her son's high school principal, and they decided that Kumid's son and 5 of his friends would lead the Say Something presentation. So that's one way to go about it. We've also both our Say Something and Start with Hello programs are downloadable so that you can self-lead them. So we've had promise leaders like Josh who've offered to lead the programs within a youth organization or a school, and that's another way that you can help lighten the load and make it easier to bring these programs in. If you're interested in more information about our programs or how to bring them to a school or organization, encourage you to follow up with us at promiseleader@sandyhookpromise.org, and we can work with you individually to help you make sure you have all the information you need and prepare you for that conversation.
All right, okay. No further typed out questions, but does anyone have any questions? I know some of you are on mute, but you can maybe take yourselves off mute if if you have further questions. I know we do have a few minutes here, so if that's okay with everyone. Anybody have any questions that they want to share out to the group? You're welcome, to speak. I've unmuted everybody, so you should be able to talk if you have, any additional thoughts that you want to share, questions.
I have a question. Hello?
Go ahead.
I have a question, but I'm on the cell.
Did you have a question?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I have tried and tried and tried. I mean, I've had some successes, I do have to say, but I still have city and county officials and school board officials and others saying, we've got this covered. It's not a priority for us. Or we're the safest city in Florida. We don't need this. And it's frustrating because I don't know how to get them past. They gave me proclamations. But after that, I don't know how to start a real conversation with them.
It was hard to hear you, but it sounds like I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody. We've got to get wrapped up here, but it sounds like you were asking how to start the conversation, and that's a great question to work with Judith. She can help you with those resources. At this time, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Like I said, we're a little bit over our time, but thank you everyone so much, and thanks for your questions. If we didn't answer your questions tonight, again, feel free to reach out to us. Link us up with any contacts that you might have if you don't feel comfortable going through that process. If you're looking to add in programs, those sorts of things. I saw a lot of those questions. Anything else, Judith and Paula, that you wanted to say to wrap up?
I wanted to say thank you for spending your evening with us on the phone or on the computer, learning more about what it means to be a Promise Leader. Just this, what might feel like a simple action of joining this webinar is a big step forward to say that you care and that you want to take action and make change in your community. And it all starts with one step. So thank you so much for being on this call. Please reach out to Judith or myself. We're here to help you. We're here to support you and work with you, and couldn't be more excited that you are joining us and helping us build our mission and protect more kids. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, and feel free to reach out.
All right, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar now. So again, thank you for being part of this. We will be sending out the recording following the meeting at some point, so be looking for that.
See all of you everywhere. Really can't see anyone anywhere. All right. So